Okay, we ready? All right, we are towards the bottom of Mem Zayin, 8 lines from the bottom, at the line where it says V'chein b'tzir of kama svoris. So Rebbe is explaining the whole concept of Gilui and Helam. Gilui and Hagbola. So he explains, in principle, using a moshel from Seichel. Seichel originates from Keich HaMaskil. Keich HaMaskil we discussed a little bit, but in principle, the Keich HaMaskil is the source of the Seichel. In principle, the meaning of Keich HaMaskil is there is a Seichel, the explanations and all the svaras and so forth. And as I explained last time, that in Seichel there are 2 parts. There's a part of Seichel, the logical part, that which the Seichel is compelling. Compelling means it forces you to accept a certain fact, because it shows you that this is the way it is. This is only the chitzonius of Seichel. The real aspect in of Seichel is how a person internalizes it, how it makes sense to him. Where not only it's compelling, I have to accept it, but really it makes sense. This is the way it should be. This is the way it is. So to illustrate this in a very important aspect, we can have compelling arguments that say that the world was created by God. Compelling arguments. Almost to the extent of logical proof. But if a person remains at that level, but he knows it only because he has logical proof, he remains distant from it. This is not the real Seichel. Real Seichel is when this concept, this union, makes sense to him. When he sees, yes, absolutely, this is what the world is. This is what I'm looking at. Like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, we're saying these days, that when we see the world, we recognize that we are seeing only that which conceals the truth. But the real truth is that it's not a mitzvah except for the fact that it's being created. And that is the pnimis of the Seichel. This is the real Seichel, which allows us to relate to that logic. And it makes sense to us. This is the real Seichel. This inyan, that Seichel, makes sense to us and it relates to us, is rooted in the Koyach HaMaskil. Because the Haskalas themselves are only the Chitzonius, the arguments, the svaras. But why does it make sense to us? Because we have a Koyach HaMaskil. Because we are Seichel-diki people to start with. And anything that's Api Seichel makes sense. So, Seichel is rooted in Koyach HaMaskil, and it's real and drawn from the Koyach HaMaskil. So that if a person wants to understand something, he approaches it with this Koyach HaMaskil, and then Seichel, Sichlim come flowing out and way to understanding on it, when to express it, way to explain it. And this Sichlim, these Svaras, these arguments, ideas that flow from Koyach HaMaskil, these Svaras consist of two parts, of the Svara itself and the limit of the Svara. The defining factor that it's a limit of how far the Svara extends. Like I gave you example yesterday, Adam, last time we learned on Monday. You remember the example?
Train.
What?
The train, when the people waiting to get in at the train, and if it's too much people, he's swore to get in. But if too much people, he's asking them to move, and they say we're not going to move, so he's not going to fight. He's gonna...
Okay, that's true, but I gave you another example from Torah. You're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do a malacha on Shabbos. And as a result of that, you're not allowed to carry out on Shabbos. So if somebody comes to you and says, "I'm allowed to carry on Shabbos, so how come you're wearing a hat? Or shoes, or a jacket? Aren't you carrying?" So you will say no. Because the fact that carrying is a malacha has a specific meaning, and it has to be within these parameters.
So what Taka we should answer?
That wearing is not a malacha. You're carrying, but it's not a malacha. This is the pshat, that you have a limit to this word. It's not a compromise. Like some people want to say, "Oh, you're finding excuses." It's not. This is a definition of a malacha. Every svara, every idea that a person says, if it is not defined at its boundaries and it's left alone to flow, you get lost, and it loses its truth. It no longer tells the truth. That's what a svara, that's what seichel is. Seichel, the idea of seichel is to isolate. You know what isolate means? To separate one thing from another. To isolate, to identify very clearly one specific thing and exclude everything else from it. Seichel does not go and explain and explain the totality of existence. It explains specifics. That's how a seichel is able to relate to things, how we can grasp things. Let's come back to a significant thing. Like I said before, God created the world, and that we can conceptualize at Seichel. Now, Seichel cannot conceive of what it means. What does it mean something exists? Doesn't make sense. How come it exists? But if you focus in and you identify parts in it, the real existence is God, which I don't know. And God created the world. And the world is not a real existence on its own. It exists only because it was created. Then I can relate to it. That's a seichelic representation of existence. But the essence of existence itself, there's no way that seichel can relate to it. Doesn't make sense. Seichel cannot create. It cannot create because it cannot even conceptualize of it. The only way that with seichel we can relate to an existence of the world is if we separate. There's a creator and there's a created. The creator is beyond our seichel. The created, that we can relate to. And the created exists only because the creator made it. So therefore it remains a limited entity, that it's created. But beyond that it is created, what the creator is, we cannot understand. That way, seichel can now relate to the world. Understand?
We understand it, that this and we study about the supernal worlds. So
About what?
when we study Hasidus, we study about supernal worlds, and we kind of understand this, makes sense to us. Not say Seichel cannot understand. We study it, but we understand.
What do we understand? What do we understand?
We have Esther Sphero, Sphirus Bri.
Yeah, okay. This is all defining factors in how the creation came about. But the creation itself, that we don't understand. This is how God created the world. In other words, this is what the finite world is from. But what is the source, the power of creation? That we don't have a means of understanding at all. Torah mitzvahs.
That's the tachlis, understand?
That's right. That's a tachlis of creation.
So you mean that the process we don't understand. And how it's happening also we don't understand, but we know it's happening. You mean like this? So good.
I don't understand where you're coming from. Do you understand God? Do you understand the creator, the ability to create? What kind of thing is that?
It's kind of like makes sense. I don't understand. John don't understand how it's working, but it makes sense.
What makes sense?
That God, the God exists and He's created the world.
Yeah, but what God is doesn't make sense. You have no way of grasping what that is. What kind of thing is that?
But it makes sense that He should be greater than sense.
Yes, that's true. It makes sense. It makes sense that the world did not make itself, but it was created. But that's it. There's no way for us to explain existence, or even the worldly existence. We can only say that there is a part in it that is beyond our understanding. That's the presence of the Creator. We have no way of understanding that. And then the world is a created being. This is the in HaSeichel. To focus in and to define things in their components. Then we can relate to things. Okay? So here we see that in that very beginning of the svara, of the idea of the seichel, there are two parts. There's the gilui and the hela. The positive and the negative, that which limits it, comes together in the seichel. Without the negative, without the limit, the svara would be totally untrue. Totally untrue.
In the sword we should have like beginning and end.
Mm-hmm.
It's like endless is not sword.
Right.
If I want to explain swara to 15 years old child or like 15 or like smart machine, the swara gonna change, right? Somebody like in my level gonna explain shorter. The child is much bigger explanation.
But regardless of how far you go, if it's seichel, it has to have a limit.
But it's like new swara. It's like it's the same swara, but it's like changed, right? It's like
It's deeper, yeah. What's the difference? The point is that it inevitably has a limit.
so the limits of the swara is depend on the person who say the swara and the person who's listen to swara.
The particular limit depends on the person, on the level of his seichel. But that there is a limit is not dependent on the person. That is inherent in the seichel itself. That's what seichel is.
So that is have to be limited is inherent in the seichel, but how much is limited?
Yeah. V'chein, similarly, there's another illustration of this concept. Again, the concept we're looking for is where we see inyan sichli, and we also recognize the need, the inherent limit of that seichel. Betziruv kama svoris, in joining many svaris, many ideas, kisheyesh svaris noites leheter. When there are svaris, when there are ideas noites leheter that lean towards heter, to say that it's permissible, or svaris leisur, and then there are svaris that say no, they should be not permissible. Hine, for there, Kishaloyiyu hasvores mugobolis. If these svores would not be limited, lo yove lo oilam, he will never be able to reach lidei gmar, to an end, to a conclusion. Lifsei kach v'kach, to conclude in a certain way. It's mutar or osur. Give you an example of that. You may have come across that. There's a din in the Torah, achrei rabim lahatis, which means you have to go by the majority. Like for instance, if you find a little bird, a fledgling, near a nest, and there are two nests. One has 100 birds, one has 50 birds. So you say it probably came from the one that has 100 birds, because it's a majority. So most probably it came from the 100 birds. Then there's another svara that the nest that's closest to the bird that you found, more logically, it came from the closest bird, from the closest. Right? It also makes sense. So now, let's say if the smaller nest is closer. So how are you going to pass it? The majority, Roiv, says this it belongs here. Korev, I say Roiv or Korev. Korev says it belongs here. Now, if you're going to attribute unlimited effect, value to each one of these svaras, you say if it came from Roiv, for sure it came from here. If there's a Roiv majority, for sure it came from here. And then if you say it's closer, for sure it came from there. Then you're in limbo. There's no way you can come to a conclusion. They have two contradictory proofs, and they're both 100%. So the whole idea that you found something between these two nests is impossible. You had to come from one or the other, but it's impossible. It couldn't come from this because the other one is supposed to come from this because the other one is more. It's not teiku, but you know what I'm saying? What's the pshat? You're leading yourself into an impossible situation.
So how impossible?
So that's why you say no. The Roiv has a certain degree of proof, of certainty, and Roiv and Korev has a certain amount. None of them are 100%. They have a weight. They have a value. And then there are klorim that you say, Roiv and Korev. If you have one thing that's Roiv and Korev, which one is more significant? So we learn out from the Torah that Roiv and Korev, Roiv is more significant than Korev. But if Korev, if we would take each svara to without a limit, without end, you would scream. How can you say that? So that when you have multiple svaras, this is why when you have multiple people talking, each one has a svara, each one has a value, and if you go according to one opinion, not according to the other, does not mean that you reject the other opinion. But it means that under the circumstances, with all things considered, this is the way to go. But it doesn't mean that you reject anything. Everyone is right. Every svara has its value and its weight. So this is what he says here. That when you have many svaras, and one svara leans in one direction, and the other one swara in another svara leans in another direction, then if they will not be limited, if you will not recognize that each svara has its limit, then you'll never come to a psak din. Never come to a conclusion. And if a seichel that cannot come to a conclusion is not a seichel. The idea of seichel is to lead you on and to come, okay, what do I do next? Seichel is not just to identify the problem. Seichel is to identify the problem, and best judgment was to do. Because since that this bird was found here in the middle, it should go either here or here. And Seichel has to have the means by which to adjudicate this.
Adjudicate?
A judge. to conclude, to psak, paskin.
The Korev is better, no?
No, roiv v'korev, hoich nachar roiv. It's not again. I mean, it depends also how much the roiv and so forth. Which means to bring the shmaitza, to bring the halacha, aliba de hilchasa. Would that be liba de hilchasa? According to halacha. Halacha is the pshat. How are you going to walk? What's your next step? If you're going to discuss svaras, you can discuss svaras indefinitely, and it won't lead you to the next step. Hilchasa means you have to go. Where do you go the next step? You have to pass on the shayla. Asukis Shmaitza, Liba de Hilchasa is a big principle in Torah. Many times you will, by the big lomdim, you'll find different methods, very interesting methods, how you come to a conclusion of a halach. Asuk Yishmaitza Liba de Hilchasa. Give you an example. You have many svaras. Roiv is a svara that makes sense. Korev is a svara that makes sense. You have many svaras, and each one of them makes sense. Now you have to come to a conclusion. The bottom line of the conclusion, sometimes is concluded on the basis of the following approach. You have a certain number of reasons to say that it goes here. Certain number of reasons to say that it goes here. Each one of these reasons is a valid reason. And there's no way for you to weigh, to judge which reason is more valid than they're both valid. How do you come to a conclusion? You take all the reasons that tell you go here. All the reasons that tell you count them. Here you have 5 reasons that say you have to go here. You have 4 reasons to go here, so you go here. It's called, you go after the Rov Svaras. But again, if you are going to attribute to each one of these svaras indefinite, unlimited power, you're never going to come to a conclusion. What do you mean you're counting them? But, right.
How you get to the 4 svaras? So you bring one svara, and then you find another 4 and another 4, so you have 4. What makes you stop? Why you say it's 4 is not more?
No, you go as far as you can go. Find all the svaras. That's what you have to do. You have to find all the svaras that throw you in one direction. Then you find all the svaras that throw you in the other direction. Now you see all the svaras, and now you have to come to a conclusion.
What does it mean? Kisheloi he was svaras migmalas. So the svaras, I should bring all the svaras, but the svaras by themselves should be limited.
Right. If Lasuk Shmaitza Liba de Hilchasa, to conclude the Shmaitza means the din, the Torah. Liba de Hilchasa, according to Halachi, Efsher is impossible to him only kasher yiyu hasvoris mugbolos. Only if the svaras have their limit. Oz, then, because each svara has its limit, then he is able to see the power, the conviction, the convincing power of one svara over another. V'yoz davka, and only then, yove la mitos hadover, only then will he come to the truth of this inyan, v'yuchal lifsei kach v'kach, and be able to come to a psak din that he should do such and such and such. Okay, so here again we see that each svara, while it is a svara, a seichel svara, which means it argues for itself and it tells you this is how the inyan is. At the same time, it has its limits. It is true, but it could be different. It could be an opposite svara. That's what the principle of seichel is. Similarly, the mashpia umekabel. When you have a mashpia umekabel, a mashpia means one who reveals and teaches seichel. A makabel is one who receives the seichel. So, the inner mashpia makabel, the true principle of mashpia makabel is let's say if someone asks you, how do you go from here to Crown Heights? Right? You know how to go from here to Crown Heights. He doesn't know. So you tell him, you have to go to this train station, take this in this train, then take this bus, and then get to Crown Heights. Once you told him this, he knows it equally with you. There is nothing hidden in this. You told him everything you know about this trip. And in fact, this inyan that you have to take this train and this bus and so forth, this is not something that you, your seichel, devised. You did not design the system. Maybe if you would design the system, you'd design it completely differently. You would have a bus straight from the yeshiva, go to Crown Heights. Express.
One stop.
They would have a helicopter. So this was not a system that you designed. You tell them this is what's available, this is how you go there. This is not the true inyan mashpia makabel. Mashpia is the pshat, just like we said before, that seichel comes from the koyach hamaskil. Mashpia means that he understands the seichel, understands the inyan at a much deeper and broader level than what he can express in seichel to the makabel. If he only knows what he read, and he can transmit the words, he's not a mashpia. He's what's called a maturgimon. He takes and he transmits. Mashpia means that he has a personal understanding of this inyan. And the reason he has a personal understanding of this inyan is, like we said before, he sees it from a koyach hamaskil perspective. Why does it make sense, the whole inyan? Like, for instance, one situation that this would be could be illustrated easily, clearly, is if you were describing to someone what a certain scenery is, what the ocean looks like. Someone who's never seen the ocean. And you saw the ocean, and you saw the waves, and you saw the whole thing, how it it operates. All the different winds in different directions, the whole impression that the ocean makes on you. And you were going to describe to somebody. Mem Zayin. Page Mem Zayin. You were going to describe it to somebody. Now, when you look at the ocean, you're not looking at this part or that part and that part. You see the whole scenery. How everything flows into the other thing. But in order to describe it to somebody, you have to now focus in, and you see that there are rocks, and there is shore, and there is further out, or there are boats over there. Whatever you have to focus in and identify certain landmarks in order to be described what you saw. This, when you focus in and trying to identify landmarks, this is already a derivative. You know, a derivative, it comes from your sale. It's not the way you were impressed with it. What you were impressed with is something much bigger.
Consequence.
Huh?
You like consequence? Like consequence?
Well, a derivative means that you take out little pieces from it. You were impressed with the whole experience. But in order to describe it, you have to describe it in little things, little pieces. The seichel. As a matter of fact, the truth is that something that you were impressed by sight, by experiencing, by seeing, you can never fully describe in words. Because the impression of sight is much deeper than anything that you can describe in words. As much as you'll talk about it. So if you want to describe your impression, he says, "Oh, it was very impressive." You're telling nothing at all. You're not telling him anything. If you want to transmit something to him and tell him something about it, you have to identify little pieces. This is called mashpia or makabel in the sense that the mashpia has a much broader, much deeper, much truer view of the union than what he can give to the makabel. So this is what the Rebbe says. Mashpia or makabel. The hechrich, we have the place, it's 4 lines from the bottom. The hechrich, it is imperative, which means it's a must. Shehamashpia yitzamtzem, that the mashpia should limit, contract, v'yalim, and conceal, v'yagbil sichloi, and limit his seichel, v'gdei sheyiskabel el hamkabel, in order that the seichel that he is giving him should be able to be accepted by the makabel.
It's a misprint. Shemashpia, the end of the line. By this.
We're missing last letters.
What?
Print not good, so it's like cut last letter.
Oh. The copy cut off? Right.
What would it be?
I
I.
Hamashpia, right.
Yeah. Appears like the above.
Okay. In order that this which he is telling him should be accepted by the Makabel. Because if he should reveal to him the seichel as he has it, etzem seichel, the essence as he understands it himself, as it is by him, lo yuchal lekabel, he will not be able to receive it and to accept it. V'tzorich lahalim etzem sichloi, and thus the mashpia has to conceal the etzem sichloi, the very essence of the seichel itself, the real seichel, u'legalo isloyan, to reveal to him rak mashe be'erkoi, only that which is, and by his measure, which is pertinent to the Makabel.
It's the Indian of the Mosholim, no? Moshol is the...
Right. But even with the moshel, he has to limit what he is trying to tell him.
The Moshol, there's the Lekudas HaSeichel. No?
Yeah. He has to, and reveal to him Masha Baby Erkoi, only that which is at his level, within his limits. And if he tells him that which is more than his limits, he won't grasp it. He won't grasp it. He wouldn't know what he's talking about.
You one of us yeshiva, they tell some idea, some svara to another Rosh Yeshiva, and they in the same
Okay,
level.
before we confuse ourselves, let's talk about Mashpia Makabel. I want to discuss this a little bit. We'll come to the Rosh Yeshiva. I gave you the motion before of someone having seen something, and now he has to express it, explain to somebody else. Now let's say two people both saw a certain union, and then discussing this union between themselves. And a third person is standing there and listening to them. And they're discussing the impression that this side had. The third person who is standing and listening to them would not be able to make heads and tails. Would make no sense at all what they're talking. And they are so excited. They're really communicating and really involved. And he is looking at them and says, they're talking in riddles. They're not saying anything.
Because they both know their essence.
Because they are right. What when they both know the essence? They are not expressing the Indian, because they know the Indian. They're only alluding to it. Alluding their maramas to it. Oh, what about? Oh, remember that over there? They're not even talking about anything. They're not expressing it. They don't need to, because they experienced it. They saw it. Just want to get each other's feedback and impression, and they get it, but this way. But if you are going to tell it to someone who has never seen it, so to you want to tell him the impression you had, but you have to at this moment forget about your impression completely. Just describe to me what you saw. Don't tell me how great it was. So that means that you have to now conceal, forget about your impression, conceal your own seichel, your own experience. And take out of it a very limited part, aspect. So that you'll be able to express it to someone who has never seen it. Okay, there's much to talk about, but you understand, this is that he has some tzams in the seichel, which means that the way he sees it, he has to completely forget about it. And take out of it the chitzonius of how he would describe it to someone who had never seen it. Okay? Okay. And therefore he has to be megalale lak masha be'erkoi. What means be'erkoi? Be'erkoi means that which is possible to be understood by someone who doesn't know of the whole idea, doesn't know that there is such, greatness. He knows only small things. So you have to start building it to him by piecemeal. V'chein, and similarly, tzorich lahagbi lesichloi, the mashpia, he has to limit his seichel. This is another aspect, another phase of it. He has to limit his seichel, shelo yispashed yoser midai, that it should not spread forth more than the proper limit. Like in this particular inyan that we're talking about. You don't have cups anymore. What's the matter?
No, maybe I've been a walk.
Shelo yispashed yoser midai, that it should not spread, his seichel should not spread more than is appropriate. B'kdei, in order sheyuchal hamkabel lekabel, in order that the makabel should be able to receive. Ki, because im yispashed yoser midai, if the seichel would be expanded beyond the proper limit, lo yiya lefi erech klei hamkabel, then the seichel will not be able to be followed by the makabel, the klei hamkabel. The klei hamkabel, there are two different things. There is the seichel and there is the klei hamkabel. The seichel is how much of a kind of concept the makabel is able to receive.
Seichel and everyone is the same, no?
No.
Why? Everyone could accept in Yonim Sifli.
Yeah, but that's what they said before. The mashpia has developed his seichel, and he has a much deeper perception of things than the makabel. The seichel is how much he can perceive, and the makabel is not able to perceive, to recognize that which mashpia. Like I said, the example, the mashpia is the one who saw it can recognize much richer thing than the one who didn't see it. The same thing is in every seichel.
Yes, erech and kli.
Right. Erech sichloi and keli. The
לא,
keli.
השכל של בן אדם בן 100, אפשר להסביר לילד...
One second. The kli amkabel is possibly a different thing. That even if you talk about sichli, that the makabel is able to understand. You still have to limit how much you put in there. How many different examples? How many different aspects of each example?
Some people can remember a lot of things. Some people forget very fast.
Right, remembering is an important thing, but this is even beyond remembering. Just to be able to follow all the whole logical explanation, it becomes very complicated and extends itself to a very great many things. He loses it. Sometimes, for instance, like yesterday, I give you the example of a seichel from Torah, and I give you the example from the train station. Two different worlds. Okay, I was able to do this because you're familiar with this, but like this, what are you talking about? You go from one end to the other. It becomes confusing. You can't follow. Also, the kelim are not big enough to follow all these various variations, even though individually they can be understood. So if the mashpia is interested that the makabel should understand, he's not just saying what he says, then he has to limit both what he says and to what extent, how much of it does he say. Not just go indefinitely. That's what I keli, kli hamakabel. This cup can hold water. But if you put more water than the size of the cup, it will overflow. The water that will overflow is the same water that's in here. It's not that it couldn't hold the water. It didn't have the room. The same thing is in a person's seichel. How much he can take at one time is limited. Even though it's all seichel that he is able to understand.
If it's a glass cup, so erech will be like, I can put hot water, but not so much. If it's too hot, it's going to crack. And the kli is like how much water.
That's right. Nimtzo, therefore it comes out, sheyesh koyach hagbolo lahagbil as haseichel. That there is the koyach hagbolo, there is the ability to be magbil, to limit the seichel. Because without this koyach hagbolo, you could not produce a seichel. You cannot teach it, you cannot give it. The hine. Now, let's understand this. Koyach hagbolo hanal. This koyach hagbolo that we described, who gam came mi koyach hamaskil atzmoy. This koyach hagbolo comes also from the koyach hamaskil. It is the koyach hamaskil that defines both. It expresses the seichel and gives it its limit and defines its boundaries. Shemishom nimshach, from there, from the koyach hamaskil, comes Giloi HaSeichel, the revealed Seichel, Haskil, Bechol, Dvar, Muskol, to be able to understand in anything that needs to be understood. Mishom Gam Nimshach Gamkin, from there too comes Koyach HaGvul, Lahagbil as HaSeichel. The Koyach HaGvul, the Koyach of limit, to limit the Seichel.
What depends on the person?
Isn't it something? Let's understand it. Let's understand this Indian. Seichel. We all talk about Seichel, but it is a very fine line to understand what is Seichel. The whole concept of Seichel, I'll step back a little bit. The whole concept of Seichel is that if a person is going to act, to do something, let's say I want to drink this cup, I want to drink the water. Very simple, okay? You wouldn't lose. I want to get this cup and drink, like I always express. There is a right way to get to it. There are many ways to get to the cup. And then there is a seichelic way how to get it. Seichel tells you, you don't have to climb under the table. You don't have to stretch out. All you have to do is put your hand out and bring it to yourself. In other words, there is a right way of doing things. Intuitively, you know what intuitively means? You can do it many ways. The Seichel says, why do you have to figure out how to do it? Figure out, before you do it, figure out how to do it. Don't just go after it. Because there's a right way to do it. Now, the in that there is a right way to do it means two things. Okay, here's what I want you to understand. Seichel says that yes, indeed, you should get that cup. And there's a right way to do it. If the Seichel only serves you, in other words, the reason I want to get the cup is nothing to do with my Seichel. I want to get it. And the Seichel only says, how do I get it? This is called Seichel Bahami. The real Seichel is the one that says, yes, you should get it. It's the right thing to do. And along with that, when it says you should get it, he also defines how to get it. It comes together. Like for instance, Seichel says that a person should work in order to earn a livelihood. Earning a livelihood is not something that comes because your landlord is throwing you out of the house. But everybody understands that Pesachel, he should work to earn a livelihood. You have to do it. Along with that you have to do that, comes also a direction. How do you do that? It comes together in the same seichel. Seichel is not going to say you have to do it. How do you do it? By robbing the bank. That doesn't go together.
Depends which seichel you use.
No, it doesn't depend which seichel it is. If this is seichel gives you the right perspective on the whole thing. If it is the right thing to do, there is the right way to do it.
So like if you're not mixing the midah, but
I'm saying if it comes from midas, it's a different thing. I'm talking about if it is a seichel that directs you. So then the seichel says both. Do it, and when it says do it, it comes along with the limit how to do it. Otherwise, seichel would not say do it.
he's gonna say to you 49 ways how you can do this. You have to also decide like which way you're gonna do it. It's swaras. He's gonna bring to you like a lot of swaras.
Right. But each one of these waters has a definitive way.
So which way is right?
Yeah, which way to try. The point is, each one, it says both. It says you have to do it, and you have to do it in the right way, let's say. And you have to figure out what is the right way. But it says you have to do it in the right way. You can't just do it indefinitely, undefined. Those have shot that the Agbola of the Seichel comes from the same Seichel.
The pure seichel is always good. Like, if you're not mixing anything like pure seichel, it's always going to be in the end. It's going to be good.
It's always going to be a piece Seichel. Sometimes you have to go above Seichel. But B'derech Klal, if it's Seichel, it will be a Seichel. You be according to what the directive of Seichel, the correctness of Seichel. So my point to you is to understand when it says over here, is to understand when I say, how do you get the cup? It's not the whole Seichel. The Seichel says, get the cup, and then along with that says how to get it. If getting the cup is not a seichel thing, then how to get a cup is something which comes from elsewhere. If the reason you're getting the cup is not a biseichel, it's a midas, so then the how to get it is completely. It's called nefesh habamis. It's a different part of it. We're talking about if it's a seichel, if the seichel tells you what to do, it tells you also how to do it.
Sometimes you know that you have to do something, but you don't know to how. Seichel said to you, is the right thing to do, but you break your head and you cannot. How I do this?
Fine, but you know that there has to be a right way to do it.
So you will hear, like, say what to do and how you have to react about this. What you should do to connect it to this.
Right. In other words, the Agbola the Agbola, the limits of the seichel comes along with the seichel. You have to go to yeshiva. You have to go to yeshiva. So are you going to break the window to get to the yeshiva, or are you going to try to get through the door? Are you going to ask permission to go in, or you just go and go in. There's a way to do it. Going to yeshiva means going to yeshiva, go to the Rosh Yeshiva and ask permission to join it. Doesn't mean just go in. There's a definition of everything that Seichel tells you to do. And both, the positive and the negative, what to do and how to do it, in other words, the limiter that you have to do it in the right way, both comes from the Koyach HaMaskil. It is a piseichel that this thing is right to do. There's a piseichel that needs to be done in the right way. Okay, let's just finish the senior beheim. Bechinas chesed u'gvura shebekoyach hamaskil. These are the two aspects in the koyach hamaskil. What's called chesed and gvura in koyach hamaskil. The bechinas achasodim sheboy, from the chesed, the aspect of chesed in the koyach hamaskil, bo koyach hagilu legalis, comes the koyach of revelation, to reveal. Bechinas hagvura, from the gvura aspect, hu koyach hagvul lahagdil. This we'll discuss next time in Mitzvah, the union from chesed and gvura in koyach hamaskil.
It's like personal chesed gvura, or it's like how much gvura, how much chesed is depending on the person, or?
No, this is inherent in the seichel itself.
So when I have a kasha about something,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking very hard, and then I get the answer. So it's like automatic give me the answer, like this is the answer, not more. Like it's coming already, like I feel it. Okay, I'm satisfied. Yeah, this is like this. But it's like intuitive. I don't need to see it and cut. Okay, so swara should be like this is miyuta. This is I don't need this. I don't need this. And this is the swara. Like it's like Ergish. Like this is it.
The chesed and gvura in that is when you have a kasha. So you have two things that contradict each other. And then you come and answer. And what is the answer? The answer is you show how these two things under this circumstance do not contradict each other. Let's say. So you join them together. That's the chesed. The gvura is that you say that you're joining them together, but you're joining them under these circumstances, with this limit. Beyond this limit, they are different.